Hello, it's Maggie, the Cheshire Crafter here. Now, it's taken a while. You can see it's now October. It's taken a while with this Quilt As You Go project, and I've unpicked it so many times I can't tell you. But I've now found a method of connecting the blocks together that I'm happy with. And I'm going to show you in this video what that method is. And then there'll be another video later on to show it when it's completed. If while you're making your quilt you're not happy with it, that's the time to change it. It's too late when you've finished it to go back and say, actually, I didn't like that bit. Change it while you're making it. Lots of different ways to do it, of course, but this is the method I preferred. Cut my sashing from white cotton. I've cut it at 2 inches wide, and I've made the strip 1/2 inch longer than the size of my blocks. So these are 7 inches by 2 inches. And to connect 2 blocks together, you need a front and a back, both the same size. I'm going to iron them, and then I'm going to fold them in half and iron a crease lengthwise. I'm going to connect these 6.5 inch blocks together, and I'm going to call this block the left block and this block the right block. I'm always going to be working from left to right. I'm right-handed. You can see I use post-it notes to help with the orientation. This is this block, this way up. So on the left block, on the right-hand side of that left block, I've pinned both pieces with right sides together, front and back. And I'm going to sew down this edge. You can see I've left some over the edge. I'll trim that back later. I'm going to sew that with an accurate 1/4 inch seam. And I'm using a white thread. I recommend that you use the same colour thread as your sashing. And it'll look like this. Now back at the iron, I want to turn it over, and I want to fold over the back piece and press it, making sure I keep this edge straight. I don't want it to bow out. You're just pressing the reverse. The front will remain the same. I use a 1 inch fusible hemming web by Hemline. Cut a piece that's 6.5 inches. It's the same length as my block. Now I'm going to cut that in half lengthwise. Hard for you to see, but I've placed that hemline fusible webbing right along the inside of the back piece of the sashing. Don't put this anywhere near the iron yet. Then take my right block, this is number 42 with the orientation correct, and I placed it on top of that fusible webbing and backing, sashing, and I've butt it right up to this seam line. I'm now going to place the top piece of webbing over that seam and fold over, and then I'm going to iron through a cloth. Make sure that the top and the bottom of the blocks match up. Follow the instructions on your fusible webbing for how long to press. I'm using a steam iron. My left block is now sewn in place and is secure. My right block is just held in place with the fusible webbing. I'm going to add some clips at either end because I'm going to hand stitch front and back on this. Now, I tried top stitching and I couldn't for the life of me get a straight stitch front and back and I'm unpicking and replacing all that cotton stitching. Let me see what this looks like, and then you'll see why I'm unpicking all this. This purely wasn't good enough. Using a single thickness of white cotton thread with a knot at the end of it, and I'm starting right at the edge, not at the edge of the sashing because that's going to be cut off. I'm starting it where the knot and these stitches will be buried in the sashing that goes across, so the horizontal sashing will hide this. So it needs to be about 1/8 of an inch away from this raw edge. Do a few back stitches here just to secure it. Then on the front I'm going to do a slip stitch, taking in just the cotton from the top of the quilt. I'm not going all the way through to the back of the quilt, and just a few threads in on the sashing. Use small even stitches. When it comes to these layers of going through seams, I often need to use a thimble. At the end, secure again with a couple of back stitches. You're doing this within the 1/4 inch seam allowance, so it's about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the block, not the edge that I've got my thumb nail on. Now take your needle and thread through to the back. You'll see that the sashing on the back looks wider than the front. That's because of the seam allowance at the front. It doesn't matter. When this is complete, we're not going to be comparing the front to the back width of the sashing. You will only see the sashing on the front or the sashing on the back. So take your needle through to the back and just do the same as you've just done on the front. And this time you're only catching in your backing fabric and a little bit of the quilting. You're not taking the needle through to the front. And do a slip stitch along and then secure it at the other end. This is similar to the way that I hand finished the binding on my quilts. I sew the binding on using the sewing machine, and then I turn over and slip stitch the binding over. This is the same idea. And finish with a knot that'll be buried in the horizontal sashing. Now this method can be used irrespective of the length of your sashing, whether it's horizontal or vertical sashing. It's neat, it's tidy, it's not particularly visible. I'll show you the front. The stitches aren't particularly visible on the front, and it's going to look neat. So that cotton doesn't look like it's been pierced by the sewing machine, because it hasn't been. Now if you compare that, where you don't actually see any stitching, to the difficulties I was having getting a straight line, catching in the fabric front and back, getting an even stitch length, not going wonky. Can you see the difficulties I've had here? And then when I turn it over, my sashing on the back wasn't getting caught in equidistance, and sometimes it just looked a right mess, and even unpicking it left holes in the fabric of the sashing like this. So I'm going to take all that sashing out and replace it with fresh new cotton and use the method that I now prefer. So I hope this has been helpful. This is Maggie, the Cheshire Crafter. I've got quite a lot of unpicking to do, but come back and see me again soon, won't you? Bye.